Hey everybody, it's John. On today's John's Briefs, I am here with Terry from Firearms Legal Protection, and I want to talk. There's been a video that's been going around of a man who comes to the aid of a pregnant woman, and in the midst of that draws his firearm. And so let's talk about this issue of when the right time to draw. Is that brandishing? Is it a defensive display? Let's talk to an attorney about it. Today's video is brought to us by the generosity of Firearms Legal Protection. Firearms Legal Protection is a legal defense program for lawful gun owners. You win the fight, and they will help you win the fight after the fight for the rest of your life. There's a link in the description for a coupon code for a discount for all active self-protection watchers. So of course, I'm going to put a link to the video in question, and it's gone all around the world. I've seen it uploaded dozens of times. And actually read a story about it, and the man in the story so far has not received any charges that I've seen. But when you watched that for the first time, Terry, as an attorney, what did you see there?
I saw a lot of mistakes by the gentleman that walked up. One of the things I always say when I teach people in class is know what you know. And what does that mean? Basically, if I take you, for example, you come home and someone is doing something to your wife, to your kids, you know what's going on. No one should be doing that. But when a stranger interjects into something and they don't know the full facts and circumstances, they're just walking up on something that could have started 10 minutes ago and they're catching the tail end. They don't know what's going on. I often tell people, you know, if you see something, you're driving, you're armed, the best thing you can do is call 911 and basically say there's something going on here. That's when you have to be a good witness at that point. I mean, you don't know if a man hits a woman or vice versa. That could be foreplay for these people. Who knows, okay?
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what's going on. But again, know what you know. And in the current video that we're talking about, this guy doesn't know anything. He walks up, he sees what he believes is a pregnant woman being harassed by a guy. He doesn't know if that's the father, the uncle. He knows nothing. And the first thing he does wrong is not only interjects himself, but he pulls his firearm out. And again, at that point, there's no, based on what I saw, there was no talk of or use of lethal force anywhere.
Right.
You can't use lethal force until you are in imminent danger or someone else is in imminent danger, and it didn't appear that way on this video.
So in some states I know, like in Arizona, there is a law about the defensive display of a firearm. So you can verbally say, hey, I have a firearm and I will defend myself if you attack me. You can even show it in its holster or something like that. Every state's a little unique on this though, and in some states, man, you can't even intimate that you have a firearm until it's time to use it, or you'll get charged with aggravated assault.
Correct.
So in some states, that video that we saw there, that'd be ag assault charges.
Absolutely.
And in other states, they might consider that to be a reckless display or a brandishing.
Brandishing, correct.
And so from a guy who's a tactician, not a lawyer, but a tactician, I watched it and saw, okay, wait a minute. First of all, you're right. He inserts himself in a place where he didn't know all the situation. Now I get it. If I see somebody who is, you know, hollering at a pregnant lady, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. We have a defenseless person here, and so some people are more apt to step in. I get it, but you're putting yourself in danger to do so.
If you realize, again, I don't know the relationship between the man and the woman there.
They didn't have one. They were strangers.
Correct, but think about it. What if those two were in a relationship?
Right.
And if you ask any police officer what's the most dangerous situation they respond to, it's domestic violence.
Right.
And again, I'm not saying that those two had a relationship, but again, you don't know what you're walking into.
You don't know.
Yeah.
And how many times have we seen news stories of a guy who steps in, you know, guys yelling at a woman, whatever, guy steps in between, hey, get off, you know, whatever. They start fighting and she brings the dude on the head because it was a domestic.
Absolutely.
So, man, be real hesitant, right? Be real hesitant. The second thing is he didn't use any verbal judo at all. He tells the guy, back the F up. Back the F. You need to, and so he's being verbally aggressive, which doesn't de-escalate the conflict at all. And so then when the guy's like, no, I don't want to back up, what are you going to do? Then he draws his firearm. He hasn't got caught any charges yet.
Yeah.
But the local prosecutor sees that and can start to go, dude, where was the deadly threat? So here's the thing. In many places, as far as I understand it, Terry, I'd like to ask you this question, that in many places, if I see an impending deadly threat, then that's when I could perhaps draw my firearm. But only if I have reasonable objective evidence that a deadly threat is coming.
Correct. It's not only coming, it's there. And we talked about this in other videos.
Right.
It's imminent.
Right.
It's right
It's
now. In this situation, there was no imminent threat. I mean, the guy was just yelling.
Right.
I understand the lady was pregnant. Again, we don't know what went on before this other person started filming this video. But again, there are other ways to handle that.
Right.
And this person handled it in probably one of the worst ways I've ever seen.
Probably one of the worst ways I've ever seen. So here's the thing. If there's a verbal threat, well then you can't escalate that even to physical force, let alone a deadly force.
Right.
And so it was an incredible mistake from a legal perspective because, like I say, all that takes is somebody to say, hey, wait a minute, this is, assault, and now he's facing charges. He might get a bunch of kind prosecutors and not face those, but he might also pay a lawyer a few $1,000s to convince a prosecutor not to charge him.
You know, one other thing, and sorry to interrupt you there, but if you look at what he did, he said, I never pointed the gun at you.
Totally irrelevant.
Exactly, and I know a lot of people are they think that, well, it's only, if I only pointed at you, then I can be charged. That's not true at all. It's because now you've introduced it, you've brandished, you can say it, but until you show it, that at that level, it's completely off the charts at that point.
Completely. Now, so again, he doesn't de-escalate, and again, when he inserts that firearm, now he's escalated this to a deadly conflict. And thank God the other guy didn't have a gun.
Right.
So now he puts the gun back away because now he shows him the gun, but what's he going to do with it? It's not an imminent deadly threat. So now if he has to go hands-on with this guy, one of his hands is taken up because he's got a gun in it he can't use.
Right.
So from a tactical perspective, bad idea. Then he has to put the gun away under stress so he can't take his eyes off this guy to clear his holster and all that stuff. Big mistake.
And if you look at it, he escorts the pregnant lady back to the car.
Right.
Excuse me there.
Yeah.
He escorts the pregnant lady back to the car, and his gun is right to his side. If you really look at the video, and the other gentleman that...
With his back to the other guy.
Exactly. I mean, it's just kind of like, okay, I get it, this guy's not going to do anything. It's like, again, going back to what you're talking about, transitional spaces and things, this guy just put himself in so many bad situations.
Terrible. Now, I will say that, so he puts the gun away. Okay, so now that issue and conflict is in the past because it's moment by moment. So now they keep arguing for a minute, and then the original aggressor reaches out and punches him, so he punches the guy back.
Right.
From a legal perspective, I think he's okay in that punch because the guy assaulted him. He escalated what was verbal in that moment to physical, and the guy has a right to physically defend himself. So I'm okay with the punch.
Correct.
Now, this is a couple things. I think number one reminds me that empty-handed skills are important because again, if I'm confident with my hand, there's no deadly threat. My gun never comes into the equation.
Correct.
Number two, I would like to talk about this. You guys know I'm always carrying the hot sauce, right? And we talk about blessing the deserving with spicy treats. Now, let's just say, Terry, we're gonna speculate for a moment here. All right, so we see this brewing physical conflict. The guy's aggressive. Let's just say that our intrepid defender had decided, instead of going for the gun, that he decides this guy's an impending physical threat, pulls out the hot sauce and spicy treats him. All right, gives him the OC spray. How would you feel about that?
That's a great question. My question would be, would it be needed at that point?
Okay.
Is it something that, first of all, did he say, hey, you need to back away, calm down? Does he have to warn him? Don't know. My big concern about this is, again, was this just verbal dialogue between the man and the woman, the first gentleman and the pregnant lady, and could it have been stopped in any other way?
So here is an interesting one to me because it feels to me like if he had, OC spray or something like that, kind of would depend on articulation at that point. Because if he said, look, the guy was balling his fists up and he was, leaning in on me and I was worried we were about to get in a physical confrontation and I didn't want to fight him, and so I OC'd him to keep from having to fight him and get me away from him.
That would have been a lot better than pulling out a gun.
Way better.
Yeah.
Because the standard of using OC spray, the justification for that, far lower than for using a firearm.
Exactly.
So, guys, listen, I think the big lesson for me is from a legal perspective, as well as from a moral perspective. If you carry a firearm, you have a high standard of expectations of moral behavior and of correct decision making. So I think that's something that people say all the time is, well, you know, it's in the heat of the moment. You can't expect me to be reasonable. But will the jury expect you to be reasonable?
They absolutely will. You know, a good friend of mine from Detroit, Rick Ector, always uses this term in his classes that he teaches. CCW does not equal 007. And what he means by that is just because you have a gun doesn't mean you can be the bad, I don't want to say ass, okay, bad ass that goes in there and protects others. You have a bigger responsibility.
You do. John Murphy from FBF Training says, gun on, ego off. Right? You can't get into those kind of things. So I would just like to say thank you. We're at the 338 Club at C2 Tactical in Scottsdale, and this is
beautiful.
The beautiful place. You can see right through there, private range, their own rental counter and all that stuff. This place is awesome. I'm not a member here because I'm not rich enough, but if you are, this is pretty darn cool. Terry, thank you for the help and the analysis and helping us to be good legal firearms carriers.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.